This analysis was carried out under the scientific supervision of Professor Vihar Kiskinov. We're going to be decoding the EU AI Act's master switch, which is Article 113. Now, this is the single provision that dictates how and when this huge landmark regulation actually comes to life.
So that brings us to the central question here. European regulators face this absolutely monumental challenge. How do you activate a law that's this comprehensive, this impactful, without completely disrupting markets, stifling innovation, or just leaving businesses totally unprepared?
And the answer, as you might have guessed, is found in Article 113. The best way to think about it is not as a single on-off switch for the AI Act, but more like a dimmer switch with multiple stages. It's a really strategic, phased rollout that's designed to perfectly balance a sense of urgency with the need for everyone to get prepared.
To really get a handle on how this all works, we've broken down this analysis into 5 parts. First, we'll look at how this timeline was even created through some tough negotiations. Then, we'll cover the very first steps, the initial bans and rules. After that, we'll talk about when the Act fully goes live for everybody. Then, we'll get into the special treatment for high-risk systems. And finally, we'll zoom out to see the global ripple effect.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. How did this timeline even come to be? It's really important to understand that the final plan we have now was not the first idea on the table. Oh no, it was shaped by years of debate and compromise between the European Commission, the Council, and the Parliament.
And this timeline, it really reveals a fascinating legislative tug-of-war. The initial proposal back in 2021 suggested a simple 24-month delay. But by 2022, the Council, probably hearing from businesses worried about getting ready in time, pushed for a much longer, 36-month timeline. The final act, well, it landed on a pretty clever compromise. It went back to 24 months, but with some really crucial exceptions baked in.
You can see that compromise in action right here. The general application date, it went back to 24 months. But look at the 2 critical changes. First, a new, super fast-tracked 6-month deadline was added to ban the most dangerous AI. But at the same time, the most complex, high-risk systems were given a longer 36-month deadline. This shows you the core strategy. Act fast on the immediate threats, but allow more time for compliance.
And this compromise leads us directly into the first steps of the rollout. The strategy is kind of like building a new city. First, you outlaw the most dangerous activities. And only after that do you set up the police force and the courts to enforce all the other laws.
Now, this first deadline is incredibly fast. We're talking just 6 months after the law's entry into force. So, by February 2nd, 2025, the very first set of rules becomes active. This initial phase is basically a rapid response team designed to stop the most harmful AI practices in their tracks immediately.
So what exactly gets banned so quickly? Well, we're talking about AI systems with what the Act calls unacceptable risk. This covers AI that manipulates our behavior to harmful ends, government-run social scoring systems, the untargeted scraping of facial images from the internet to build databases, and things like emotion recognition tech in workplaces and schools.
Okay, the next milestone hits 1 year in, by August 2nd, 2025. After banning the worst offenses, this is the phase where the rulebook and the entire enforcement structure get officially established.
This is all the essential groundwork. It means designating notified bodies. These are independent third-party organizations that will actually assess AI systems for compliance. This phase also puts the specific rules in place for powerful general-purpose AI models. It formally establishes the new EU AI Office for Coordination, and it sets up the whole framework for penalties and fines.
And all of this brings us to the main event. After the urgent bans are in place and the enforcement machinery is built, the AI Act becomes the general law of the land for the vast majority of AI systems out there.
On August 2nd, 2026, which is the 2-year mark, the Act hits its general application date. From this point on, most AI providers have to comply with the core requirements on things like risk management, data governance, technical documentation, and transparency. This is when the Act truly goes live for pretty much everyone else.
But there's one final phase we need to cover. It deals with the most critical and, frankly, the most potentially impactful category of AI. And this group gets its own extended deadline.
And that raises a really important question, right? Why would you grant an extra year of preparation for the very systems that have been identified as high risk? I mean, it seems a little counterintuitive, but there's a very clear logic behind it.
So the final deadline is set for August 2nd, 2027. That's a full 36 months, 3 years after the law enters into force.
This is specifically for those AI systems classified as high risk, and that extra time really acknowledges just how complex they are.
So to make this a little more concrete, what are we talking about? Well, high-risk systems include AI that's used to manage critical infrastructure, our water and energy grids. They include medical devices and diagnostic tools. They also cover systems that make huge decisions about people's lives, like those used for hiring and firing, in law enforcement, or for scoring university applications.
So you see, this delay isn't a free pass. It's a necessary runway to get things right. It allows time for official, harmonized technical standards to be developed across the entire EU. It also gives providers the time they absolutely need to conduct the incredibly complex assessments required to prove their systems are safe, reliable, and fair.
Okay, for our final piece, let's zoom out from all the specific dates for a moment. Because this isn't just a European story. The careful, staggered rollout of the AI Act is really poised to have a significant global ripple effect.
This phenomenon is often called the Brussels effect. Because the EU is such a massive market, international companies often find it's just easier to adopt Europe's high standards globally rather than trying to maintain different product versions. And the AI Act's rules, they apply to any AI system whose output is used in the EU. That means companies in the US or Asia will have to comply if they want to operate in the European market. The power behind all this? It comes from the final sentence of Article 113 itself. It says this regulation is binding in its entirety and directly applicable in all member states. So this isn't a suggestion, it's the law. It creates a single, harmonized AI rulebook for a market of nearly 450 million people.
So, to sum it all up, the AI Act's phased rollout is really a masterclass in strategic implementation. It perfectly balances the urgency to act against the most immediate threats with the practical need for preparation when you're dealing with complex, high-stakes technology. This really creates a powerful and influential model for AI governments everywhere.
And that leaves us with one final provocative thought. As companies all around the world start aligning their development cycles to meet these deadlines, we really have to ask ourselves, will the EU's carefully crafted timeline ultimately become the world's de facto AI timeline?